When I was told I was dying, I thought that would be the hardest truth to face. I was wrong. Betrayed by the woman I loved, I set out on one final journey, not to escape, but to find peace. Along the way, I discovered solace, forgiveness, and a reason to leave behind something more than pain. I was sitting in the doctor's office, and the doctor's office smelled faintly of antiseptic, a scent that clung to every surface like an unwelcome reminder of the inevitable. I sat in the cold, sterile chair, gripping the armrests as though they were the only things anchoring me to reality. Dr. Patel's voice was calm but heavy, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. "Mr. Collins," she began, her eyes filled with a compassion I didn't want. "The scans confirm late-stage stomach cancer. Unfortunately, it's terminal. Treatment at this point would only prolong your suffering, not your life." The words blurred in my mind. Terminal, no treatment, a ticking clock. My vision swam, but I managed to nod as though I understood, though the enormity of it hadn't yet sunk in. How does one react to learning their days are numbered? There's no guidebook for that. My fingers dug into the armrests, the leather creaking under the strain as I fought the rising tide of panic. I thanked her robotically, the polite veneer of normalcy the only thing keeping me from breaking down right there. The walk back to my car felt surreal. The sun was shining, people bustled along the streets of Maplewood, and the world moved on as though nothing had changed. But everything had. My time was no longer infinite, and every passing second felt like a thief stealing moments I could never reclaim. When I arrived home, Rachel greeted me with her usual warmth. Her smile lit up the room as she kissed my cheek. "How was your appointment?" she asked, her voice light, expecting nothing more than a routine answer. "Fine," I lied, my voice betraying nothing of the storm within me. I couldn't tell her, not yet. Rachel hated bad news. She always said she preferred to live in a bubble of happiness for as long as possible, and I wanted to protect her from this one as long as I could. My silence was selfish, maybe, but in that moment I justified it as love. That night I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Rachel slept peacefully beside me. The soft rhythm of her breathing was a cruel contrast to the chaos in my mind. I had 7 years of memories with this woman, my wife, my partner. And now I had to decide how to spend the little time I had left. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would plan a trip to Maplewood Bay, the small coastal town where we had first met. It was where our story had begun, and I wanted it to be where our story ended. A romantic getaway to celebrate the life we had built together, even if she didn't yet know it would be our last. I spent the next few days poring over itineraries and booking reservations. The trip had to be perfect. Every detail mattered: sunset walks along the beach, dinner at the quaint cafe where we had shared our first date, and revisiting the lighthouse where I had proposed to her. It would be a bittersweet goodbye wrapped in the illusion of a vacation. The night before our departure, Rachel walked into the living room, her expression unusually tense. "I can't go tomorrow," she said, avoiding my gaze. "An urgent business trip came up. I'm so sorry, but it's really important." Her words were a gut punch, but I managed a tight smile. "It's okay," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. I believed her at first. Rachel's job often demanded sudden trips, and I had no reason to doubt her. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to finalize the plans for the trip. Even if she couldn't come right away, I could still make it special for when she joined me. I grabbed my phone to check emails about our reservations, but a notification caught my eye. It was a live stream from a popular social media account I didn't recognize. Curiosity flickered, and I opened it, wondering what it could be. What I saw made my stomach churn. There she was, Rachel, wrapped in the arms of another man, Lucas, someone I recognized vaguely from her office holiday party. The comments on the stream gushed over their chemistry, praising the couple as though they were the stars of some romantic film. Then they kissed. 7 years. 7 years of love, trust, and shared dreams shattered in seconds. I sat frozen, my chest tightening with a pain far worse than anything the cancer had inflicted on me. The betrayal was so blatant, so public, that I couldn't even summon the energy to cry. I stared at the screen, numb, as the live stream continued, showcasing a life I hadn't even known existed. I closed the stream and set my phone down, my hands trembling. The tears didn't come, nor did the anger. There was only a hollow emptiness, as though someone had carved out my insides and left me a shell of who I had been just minutes before. The cancer didn't hurt as much as this. By the time morning arrived, I had made my decision. I packed my things and left for Maplewood Bay alone. This trip was no longer about us, it was about me. I needed to find some semblance of peace, to come to terms with the reality of my life before it ended. As I drove down the winding roads leading to the coast, the weight of everything pressed down on me. Rachel's betrayal, my impending death, the life I thought I had but didn't, it all swirled together in a storm of emotions I couldn't quite name. The soft hum of the car's engine and the rhythmic passing of trees along the road became my only solace. With every mile that passed, I felt the man I had been slipping away. The hopeful husband, the dreamer who had believed in love and second chances, was gone. All that remained was a man with a ticking clock, searching for meaning in the days he had left. As the town's welcome sign came into view, I whispered to myself, "This is the end of who I was." Maplewood Bay was alive with the hum of life, its streets bustling with tourists who seemed oblivious to the weight pressing down on my shoulders. I found a quiet park near the bay, one Rachel and I had visited years ago. Back then, this bench had been our refuge, a place where we laughed, shared dreams, and planned a future we thought was unshakable. Now I sat there alone, the sound of seagulls overhead a stark reminder of the life moving on around me, indifferent to my unraveling. I leaned back, letting the crisp breeze wash over me. Couples strolled by, hand in hand, their smiles genuine, their laughter untainted. I had once imagined us here in our later years, walking these paths together, reminiscing about where it all began, but those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else now. The bench beneath me was no longer a symbol of comfort, but of everything I had lost. The shrill buzz of my phone broke through my thoughts. I hesitated before pulling it out of my pocket, Rachel's name flashing on the screen. My finger hovered over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to shut her out completely, but another part, a smaller, weaker part, needed to hear her voice. "Hello," I said, my tone colder than I intended. "How's the trip?" Rachel's voice came through the line, light and breezy, as though nothing had changed. She sounded almost happy. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "It's fine," I replied curtly. "Work going well?" I asked, my words sharp with accusation. There was a pause on her end, long enough to betray her. "Yes, busy," she finally said, her tone faltering. I could almost hear her scrambling for an excuse, for a way to maintain the illusion she had carefully crafted. "Come home," I said, my voice eerily calm, too calm. I wanted her to know I knew, but I wasn't ready to confront her outright. Not yet. Right now. Another hesitation. "Can't," she said, the lie falling from her lips effortlessly. "It's important." The calm in my voice cracked, but only slightly. "I see," I said before ending the call without another word. The weight of her deception settled heavier on my chest. I threw my phone into my bag, unwilling to hear more of her lies. She had Lucas. Let her stay with him. I stood and began walking, no destination in mind. The cobblestone streets of Maplewood Bay, once so charming, now felt like a maze I couldn't escape. My heart felt like it was dragging me through molasses, each step heavier than the last. I passed the bakery where we'd once shared croissants and coffee on a chilly morning, laughing as crumbs fell from our lips. I passed the bookshop where she had insisted on buying a novel for our quiet evenings by the fire. Every corner of this town was a monument to a love that had been buried under lies. The memories came unbidden, each one cutting deeper than the last. The first time I saw her in that cafe, her smile brighter than the sunlight streaming through the windows. The way her eyes lit up when I proposed at the lighthouse, the waves crashing behind us in applause. How she held my hand as we stood on this very street, promising we'd come back here someday. I found myself in a small, quiet cafe tucked away from the main road. It was nearly empty, save for a young couple seated by the window. They were laughing, their heads closed together, sharing a moment so intimate it felt almost intrusive to watch. The man's eyes sparkled as he looked at her, a tenderness that radiated across the room. It was a look I hadn't seen from Rachel in years. I turned away, focusing instead on the mug of coffee in front of me. The bitter taste mirrored the ache in my chest. The laughter from the couple was a cruel reminder of what I had once believed was unshakable. Love, trust, connection. All of it felt like a lie now, a facade I had been too blind to see through. That night, back in my small inn room, I couldn't hold it all in anymore. I pulled out a pen and paper, the blank page staring at me like a challenge. My hand trembled as I began to write. "Rachel, I hope you find the happiness I couldn't give you. I hope Lucas is everything I was. You've made your choice and I have to live with mine. I thought we had something real, something unbreakable, but I was wrong. I don't hate you. I don't even know if I can blame you, but I can't be the man who fights for someone who has already left. Goodbye." The words flowed like a dam breaking, years of suppressed fears and doubts spilling onto the page. When I finished, I folded the letter and set it on the nightstand. I didn't send it. I wasn't ready to let go completely, even though I knew I should. The next morning, I woke to the sound of waves crashing in the distance. I stepped outside, letting the salty air fill my lungs. Maplewood Bay's charm remained, but it felt distant, like a painting I could admire but never touch. The streets were quieter now, the tourists still asleep in their beds. I wandered again, this time without a destination or purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, the town came alive with lights. They blurred before my eyes as tears I hadn't realized I was holding back finally spilled over. The grief was overwhelming, not just for Rachel's betrayal, but for the life I thought we had. The life I had fought to preserve, even as it crumbled around me. Sitting on a bench overlooking the bay, I let the tears fall freely. For the first time since my diagnosis, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my pain. The cancer, the betrayal, the loss of who I thought I was, it all crashed over me like the relentless waves against the rocks below. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in the storm of my emotions. But as the night deepened and the town grew quieter, I realized one thing: I couldn't keep carrying this weight. I couldn't keep pretending to be okay. This storm within me needed an outlet, or it would consume what little time I had left, and so I resolved to face it, to face her, to face the truth of my life, no matter how painful it might be. The inn stood on the edge of a hill overlooking Maplewood Bay, a quaint two-story structure painted in soft shades of cream and green. It was the kind of place that exuded warmth and welcome before you even stepped inside. The sign swinging gently in the breeze read the bay's Hearth, and as soon as I saw it, I knew it was where I needed to be. I parked the car and stepped out, the sea breeze carrying with it the faint scent of salt and wildflowers. The sound of a screen door creaking open caught my attention, and an elderly woman emerged from the porch. She had silver hair pulled into a neat bun and wore an apron dusted with flour. Her smile was instant and genuine, reaching her eyes. "You must be our new guest," she said, her voice rich with kindness. "Welcome, I'm Eleanor Howard, but everyone just calls me Mrs. Howard." She gestured me inside, where the inn's interior felt like stepping into someone's cherished home. The walls were lined with bookshelves and framed photographs, and a fireplace crackled warmly in the corner. The scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, and a golden retriever ambled over, wagging his tail enthusiastically. "And this is Buddy," Mrs. Howard said as the dog nudged my hand with his nose. "He's our official greeter." I couldn't help but smile as I scratched behind Buddy's ears. The tension in my chest loosened slightly, the ache of the past few days giving way to a faint sense of comfort. Mrs. Howard's husband soon appeared, a jovial man with a full head of white hair and a booming laugh. "Name's George, but call me Mr. Howard," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "You'll be staying in the lavender room, best view in the house." The Howards wasted no time in making me feel at home. As Mrs. Howard brewed me a cup of tea in the cozy kitchen, Mr. Howard regaled me with stories of Maplewood Bay, how he and Alina had met here in their youth, the festivals that brought the town to life, and the generations of guests who had passed through their doors. Buddy, the golden retriever, stuck close to me from the moment I arrived. Everywhere I went, his tail wagged as though he were reassuring me I wasn't alone. His quiet companionship was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. In a world that felt like it was crumbling, his simple joy reminded me of something I had long forgot: unconditional love. Over the next few days, I found myself settling into a rhythm. Mornings began with Alina's hearty breakfasts, fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, and coffee brewed to perfection. The table was always laden with more food than I could eat, and the Howards insisted I take seconds. "Eat up," Mrs. Howard would say with a twinkle in her eye. "You're too thin. A little extra won't hurt." I spent my days exploring the trails that wound through the hills around Maplewood Bay. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. The physical pain from my illness seemed lighter out there, as if nature itself was offering me reprieve. Each step felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was still alive, still moving forward. The evenings were my favorite, though. Mrs. Howard would prepare a home-cooked dinner, often something comforting like pot roast or chicken pie, and we'd sit around the dining table sharing stories and laughter. The Howards were excellent hosts, treating me like family rather than just a guest. It had been years since I had felt so cared for, and I didn't realize how much I had missed it until now. But I didn't tell them about the cancer. I didn't want their pity or the shift in demeanor that always followed such revelations. I wanted to pretend, if only for a little while, that I was just another traveler passing through, not a man running out of time. The Howards seemed to sense I carried a weight but never pride, for which I was grateful. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, Mr. Howard leaned back in his chair and asked, "So do you have family waiting for you back home?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, the words sticking in my throat. After a moment, I replied, "I was married." The past tense felt like the only truth I could muster. He nodded thoughtfully, not pressing further. "Sometimes," he said after a pause, "it's the places we visit alone that teach us the most about ourselves." That night, as I lay in the lavender room with its view of the moonlit bay, the memories of Rachel and Lucas crept back in. No matter how hard I tried to push them away, they lingered, a knife that twisted deeper with every thought. The image of them together, laughing and kissing, played on a loop in my mind. I clenched my fists, my chest tightening with the weight of betrayal. Unable to sleep, I turned on the bedside lamp and pulled out a notebook I had picked up at a shop in town. I started to write, at first aimless scribbles of emotion, raw and unfiltered. But as the words poured out, they began to take shape, a narrative of my pain and confusion. It was the first time I had confronted my feelings head-on, and though it was exhausting, it felt like a small release. Journaling became my quiet therapy. Each night I would pour my emotions onto paper, the notebook becoming a confidant I hadn't realized I needed. It didn't take the pain away, but it helped me make sense of it, piece by piece. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a fleeting sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from acceptance or resolution, but rather a momentary stillness in the storm. Sitting by the fire with Buddy at my feet, the Howards chatting softly in the background, I realized I had found a small pocket of solace in the chaos of my life. The days passed, each one marked by the rhythms of the inn, the warmth of the Howards' hospitality, the wagging tail of a loyal dog, and the quiet beauty of Maplewood Bay. Though the pain of my illness remained and the memories of Rachel still haunted me, I clung to these moments. They were small but precious, and in their simplicity I found a flicker of hope. Perhaps, I thought, I could spend what time I had left chasing not answers but peace. The morning had started like any other at the bay's hearth. The golden light of dawn filtered through the curtains of my room, and the soft aroma of fresh coffee drifted up from the kitchen below. I lingered in bed, listening to the distant cries of seagulls, savoring the fragile peace the inn provided. I was still in that delicate space between sleep and wakefulness when I heard the sound of car tires crunching on gravel outside. Curious but unconcerned, I rose and dressed slowly, the stiffness in my body a reminder of the illness that now governed my days. As I descended the stairs, the faint hum of voices drifted toward me. At first, I didn't recognize the second voice, but as I reached the bottom step and turned the corner, I froze. There she was, Rachel, standing in the entryway of the inn. Her hair was tied back neatly, and she wore a perfectly tailored coat, the picture of composure, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted around nervously, flicking from me to Mrs. Howard and back again. "Why didn't you tell me where you were?" Rachel's voice carried a tone I hadn't expected, a strange mix of guilt and entitlement. My blood boiled at the sight of her. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't speak. The betrayal, the lies, the image of her with Lucas, it all surged back with a force that nearly knocked the wind out of me. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. Mrs. Howard, standing at my side, seemed to sense the tension. Her hands were planted firmly on her hips, and her kind face was now a mask of quiet indignation. "You're his wife?" she asked, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Then why aren't you the one taking care of him?" Rachel's confidence wavered. She glanced at me, then back at Mrs. Howard. "I was busy with work," she mumbled, her tone defensive. But even she seemed to realize how hollow the excuse sounded. Mrs. Howard wasn't having it. "Work? What work is more important than your husband's health?" she demanded, her protective instincts bristling. Rachel stammered, trying to explain, but I cut her off. My voice was cold and steady. "Busy with Lucas, you mean?" The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened as if to deny it, but the truth was written in her eyes. She couldn't hide it, not from me, not anymore. For a moment, the room felt unbearably still. Even Buddy, who usually greeted every guest with enthusiasm, stood quietly at my side, his tail lowered. I couldn't stand to look at her any longer. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the inn, leaving her standing there. My footsteps echoed on the wooden porch as I stepped into the crisp morning air. The breeze carried the scent of salt and pine, but it did nothing to cool the fire raging inside me. I walked aimlessly, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, trying to wrestle my emotions back under control. I wandered for hours, retracing the trails I had come to know so well. The trees offered some semblance of solitude, their tall canopies shielding me from the weight of the world. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't escape the bitterness that gnawed at me. The sight of Rachel at the inn, her feigned concern, her audacity to show up uninvited, it was all too much. By the time I returned, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I avoided the common areas, slipping quietly up to my room, hoping to avoid any further confrontation. But Rachel had other plans. I found her waiting for me, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her coat was draped over the chair, and her makeup had smudged slightly, as though she had been crying. She looked up as I entered, her eyes wide and pleading. "We need to talk," she said softly. I closed the door behind me but didn't move closer. "Talk about what, Rachel? About Lucas? About the lies?" "It's not what you think," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. Please let me explain." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and foreign in the quiet room. "Fix this? You want to fix this?" I stepped closer, my hands clenched at my sides. "You've made your choice, Rachel. You made it the moment you kissed him, the moment you lied to me. Now live with it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they didn't move me, not this time. I had seen this performance before. The tears, the apologies, the promises of change, they were empty gestures, as hollow as the excuses she had given me for years. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she sobbed. "I was scared. I felt like we were drifting apart, and Lucas, he was just there, saying all the things I needed to hear. And I was." I shot back, my voice rising. "I was planning to take you back to the place where we met, to give us one last chance to remember what we had. While I was doing that, you were busy throwing it all away." She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I had held this anger in for too long, and now it was spilling out in sharp, cutting fragments. "I'm dying, Rachel," I said finally, my voice breaking. "Did you know that, or were you too busy with Lucas to notice?" Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no pity. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "It's too late," I said. "You've already taken everything from me. Just leave me with what little time I have left." She sat frozen, her face streaked with tears, unable to respond. After a long moment, I turned away from her and moved to the window, staring out at the bay. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and unyielding, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. Behind me, Rachel stood and walked to the door. She paused, as if waiting for me to stop her, but I remained silent. When she left, the door clicked shut softly, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, the weight of the confrontation settling heavily on my shoulders. I knew Rachel wasn't leaving the inn, not yet. She wasn't the type to give up easily, even when the damage was irreparable. But for now, at least, I had silence. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was something I could cling to, and for that I was grateful. The morning began with a cruel reminder of my condition. A pounding headache reverberated through my skull as nausea gripped me like an iron vice. I staggered to the bathroom, clutching the sink for balance as I splashed cold water on my face. The man staring back at me in the mirror was barely recognizable, pale, gaunt, and hollow-eyed. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The cancer was progressing faster than I had anticipated. The Howards noticed my weakened state during breakfast. Mrs. Howard placed a hand on my arm, her brow furrowed with concern. "You look unwell, dear," she said softly. "Maybe you should see a doctor." Reluctantly, I agreed. Later that afternoon, I visited the small clinic in town. The doctor, a kind but frank woman named Dr. Fletcher, reviewed my recent symptoms and ran a few quick tests. Her expression as she returned to the room told me everything before she even spoke. "The disease is advancing rapidly," she said gently. "I'm sorry, but you don't have much time left." Her words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I had known this moment was coming, but hearing it aloud was different. It made the ticking clock feel louder, more insistent. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out of the clinic in a daze, the world around me muted and distant. When I returned to the inn, I found Rachel waiting for me in the common room. Her face was pale and her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. Something in her demeanor put me on edge immediately. "I need to talk to you," she said as soon as I stepped inside. Her voice trembled, and for once it wasn't because she was trying to manipulate me. It was fear, real and raw. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. She stood and took a shaky breath before blurting out, "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a freight train. My first reaction was disbelief. "What?" I said, my voice sharp. "I'm pregnant," she repeated, her voice steadier this time. "Yours?" The room seemed to tilt, and I grabbed the back of a chair for support. My heart twisted painfully, a mix of emotions swirling inside me: shock, anger, confusion, and beneath it all a flicker of hope. "Are you sure?" I asked, the words heavier than I intended. Her eyes widened in hurt. "Of course I'm sure," she snapped, but then her tone softened. "Please, you have to believe me." But I didn't, not entirely. The image of her with Lucas haunted me, his hands on her, his lips on hers. How could I trust her after everything? And yet, a part of me wanted to believe her. If this child was truly mine, it could be the legacy I had been searching for, the part of me that would live on after I was gone. Rachel must have sensed my hesitation because she stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "We can start over," she pleaded. "For the baby, I know I've hurt you, but this changes everything. We can be a family again." Her words hung in the air, tempting and treacherous. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. Could this child be a chance at redemption, or was it just another betrayal in disguise? I didn't know what to say, so I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there. That evening, I found myself in the kitchen with Mrs. Howard, who was kneading dough for tomorrow's bread. Her calm presence had become a source of comfort for me, and I needed her wisdom now more than ever. "She says she's pregnant," I said, finally breaking the silence. "She swears it's mine, but..." Mrs. Howard glanced up from her work, her hands covered in flour. "But you don't trust her," she finished gently. I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "What if it's true? What if this child really is mine? Do I have a responsibility to stay, to try?" She wiped her hands on a towel and came to sit across from me. "That's a question only you can answer," she said. "But let me tell you this, life is precious, even in its smallest form. If there's a chance this child is yours, focus on that life. Don't let your anger or pain cloud what could be a beautiful gift." Her words resonated deeply, and for the first time I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this child could be the light in the darkness, the reason to keep fighting even as the cancer consumed me. But my cautious optimism didn't last long. A few days later, I walked past Rachel's room and heard her speaking in hushed tones. Curious, I lingered by the door, straining to catch her words. "Lucas, I told you it's complicated," she said, her voice tense. "I'm trying to figure things out, just give me time." My heart sank as the full weight of her betrayal hit me once more. She was still talking to him, still making plans for a future that didn't include me. Whatever hope I had felt evaporated, replaced by a cold, unyielding clarity. Rachel didn't want to start over. She didn't want a family. She wanted to manipulate me, to use the child as leverage to keep me tied to her, even as she pursued a life with Lucas. The realization was like a knife to the chest. I returned to my room, my hands trembling with anger and grief. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor as the truth settled over me. Rachel had abandoned me long ago, and this child, if it even was mine, was just another casualty of her selfishness. I made my decision that night. I would not fight for someone who had already left me behind. I would not sacrifice what little time I had left chasing the illusion of a family with a woman who had broken every vow she had ever made to me. The next morning, I confronted Rachel. She tried to deny the phone call at first, but the guilt on her face was undeniable. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'll support the child, but I won't stay with you. You've made your choice, Rachel, now I'm making mine." Her tears flowed freely, but they didn't move me. I had spent too long drowning in her lies. It was time to let go for my sake and for whatever time I had left. As I walked away from her, I felt a strange sense of relief. The storm inside me had finally calmed, and though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was done living for someone who couldn't see the value of the life we had built together. Now, I would live for myself and maybe, just maybe, for the child who might carry my name forward into a world I would no longer be part of. The morning was unusually still, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what I was about to do. I sat at the small desk in my room at the baize hearth, the divorce papers spread out before me. My hand hovered over the pen, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. I knew this step would be final, but it was a necessity. Rachel and I had already crossed a point of no return. When I finally called her to my room, she appeared hesitant, as if she already knew what was coming. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of defiance and unease. "Rachel," I began, keeping my voice calm but firm, "this isn't working. It hasn't been for a long time." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'll support the child," I said, motioning to the papers on the desk, "but I can't support you. I can't do this anymore." Her face twisted in anger and she stepped into the room, slamming the door behind her. "You're just running away because you're dying," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You're too much of a coward to face what's happening." The words stung, sharper than I'd expected. For a moment, I stared at her, feeling the familiar ache of betrayal flare up again. But this time, I didn't let it consume me. "Maybe you're right," I said evenly. "Maybe I am running away. But you're the one who ran away first, Rachel, long before this." Her anger faltered and she looked away, her cheeks flushed with shame. I reached for the divorce papers and held them out to her. "Sign them," I said. "Let's end this farce." She stared at the papers as though they were a physical slap. No, she said, shaking her head. I won't do it. We can fix this. I sighed, the exhaustion in my voice unmistakable. Fix it? I repeated bitterly. You don't even want to fix it. You want to keep me around because it's convenient, but I'm done being your convenience. When she still didn't take the papers, I leaned forward, my gaze steady. If you don't sign them, I'll tell everyone about Lucas, your family, your friends, even your boss. How do you think they'll feel about you carrying another man's child while pretending it's mine? Her face drained of color and she snatched the papers from my hand. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice venomous as she signed her name with sharp, angry strokes. When she finished, she threw the pen onto the desk and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. As the sound of her footsteps faded down the hall, I exhaled deeply, my shoulders sagging under the weight of relief. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from her lies, her manipulations, and the toxic web of deceit that had entangled our marriage. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long finally began to lift. I returned downstairs where Mrs. Howard was setting out fresh scones for the guests. She looked up as I entered, her face softening when she saw the weariness in my eyes. She's gone, I said simply, my voice quiet. Mrs. Howard nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she reached out and patted my arm. Good, she said gently. Now you can focus on what really matters. In the days that followed, I began to settle into a new routine. The Howards welcomed me back into their lives with open arms, treating me more like family than a guest. Their kindness became my anchor in those turbulent days, their laughter a salve for my wounded spirit. Buddy, the ever-faithful golden retriever, never left my side. His wagging tail and soulful eyes reminded me of the simple, unspoken comfort that only animals can provide. Each morning he would nudge me awake with his nose, ready to accompany me on my walks along the trails. Those walks became my sanctuary, a time to reflect and find peace in the beauty of nature. But the inevitability of my condition loomed over me like a dark cloud. The days felt shorter, each one slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Knowing my time was limited, I began writing letters to the child Rachel claimed was mine. I poured my hopes and regrets onto the pages, crafting a legacy I could leave behind for a child I might never meet. In those letters, I shared everything I wished I could say in person. I told them about the importance of kindness, the beauty of simple joys, and the mistakes I had made. I wanted them to know that, despite the circumstances, they were loved even by a father who wouldn't be there to hold them. Writing became my solace, a way to channel the storm inside me into something meaningful. Each evening, I would sit by the fire with Buddy at my feet and the Howards chatting softly in the background. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was enough. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, I stood on the porch and watched the golden light spill across the bay. The sight filled me with a sense of quiet resolution. I knew what I needed to do next. I needed to say goodbye, not just to the inn and the Howards, but to the world. I began planning my final journey, a trip to the sea where I could find peace in the sound of the waves and the endless horizon. It felt fitting, an echo of the place where I had once believed my life was beginning. Now it would be where it ended. I packed lightly, taking only the essentials, a suitcase, my journal, and the letters I had written. As I zipped the bag shut, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a quieter, more introspective one. Before I left, I sat with the Howards in their cozy kitchen, sharing one last breakfast. Mrs. Howard fussed over me as always, piling my plate with more food than I could eat. Mr. Howard clapped me on the back and said, "You've been a part of this place, son, don't forget that." I promised I wouldn't. When the time came to say goodbye, Mrs. Howard hugged me tightly, her eyes misty. "Brought something special to this inn," she said. "We'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. With Buddy wagging his tail at my side, I stepped outside and took one last look at the bay's Hearth. The inn had been my refuge, a place where I had found solace and strength in my darkest moments. It would always hold a piece of my heart. With a deep breath, I picked up my suitcase and started down the path toward the car. The sea awaited me, and with it, the closure I had been seeking. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it on my own terms. The drive to the coastal town was long, winding through stretches of quiet countryside and rolling hills. Each turn of the wheel felt like a step further away from everything I had known, yet closer to the peace I desperately sought. When I finally arrived, the sight of the ocean stretching endlessly before me was like a balm for my weary soul. The waves crashed against the rocky shore, their rhythmic sound a reminder that life continues, unyielding and eternal. The town itself was small and secluded, a hidden gem far removed from the bustling world. Its cobblestone streets were lined with weathered cottages, their shutters painted in soft blues and greens. Locals moved at an unhurried pace, their faces kind and open. I could feel the weight of my troubles easing, if only slightly, as I drove through the narrow streets. I rented a small cottage perched on a hill overlooking the sea. It was modest, just a single bedroom, a kitchenette, and a cozy sitting area, but it was perfect. The view from the window stole my breath. Each morning, the sunrise painted the ocean in hues of gold and pink, and I found myself waking early just to watch the world awaken. The cottage became my sanctuary. I spent my mornings on the porch, wrapped in a blanket with a cup of tea in one hand and my journal in the other. Writing had become my lifeline, a way to capture the fragments of myself before they slipped away. I poured my thoughts onto the pages, memories of Rachel, reflections on my choices, and my hopes for the child I would never meet. Memories of Rachel lingered like ghosts, but they no longer haunted me. The anger I had carried for so long had finally faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I had forgiven her not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to that bitterness had only weighed me down, and I needed to be free of it. Letting go felt like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The cancer, however, was relentless. The pain grew sharper with each passing day, a constant reminder that my time was running out. Every breath felt heavy, every movement an effort. But the beauty of the ocean, the way it sparkled under the sun and roared its defiance at the cliffs, reminded me that life, even at its end, was still worth cherishing. It was during one of my walks along the shore that I met Lena. She was staying in the cottage next to mine, a young traveler with an easy laugh and a kind heart. She was sitting on a large driftwood log, sketching in a worn notebook when I passed by. She glanced up, smiled, and waved as if we were old friends. Something about her openness disarmed me, and I found myself walking over to say hello. Lena had a way of drawing people out without prying. She spoke of her adventures with a vividness that painted pictures in the air, hiking through misty mountains, exploring bustling city markets, and sleeping under the stars in faraway lands. Her stories brought color to my gray days, her laughter infectious and unguarded. She noticed my frailty, of course, but she never pushed. Instead, she treated me like an old friend, sharing simple joys that I had forgotten how to appreciate. We walked barefoot along the sand, letting the cold water lap at our feet. We visited the local market, sampling fresh fruit and pastries from smiling vendors. She told me silly jokes, her laughter lighting up even the cloudiest of days. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of amber and violet, I finally told her the truth. We were sitting on the porch of my cottage, a soft breeze carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. "I'm dying," I said quietly, staring at the horizon, "and I'm alone." Lena didn't respond immediately. When I turned to look at her, I saw that her eyes were brimming with tears, but her smile remained soft and unwavering. "You're not alone," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here." Her words were simple but profound. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world by myself. Lena became my anchor, someone who didn't pity me or treat me like I was fragile. She simply walked alongside me, sharing my journey without asking for anything in return. As my strength waned, Lena's presence became a source of quiet comfort. She helped me embrace the small joys I had overlooked for so long, the feel of sand between my toes, the taste of fresh bread from the bakery, the sound of the wind rustling through the grass. She reminded me that even in the shadow of death there was still beauty to be found. One day she brought over her sketchbook and showed me her drawings. They were filled with scenes from her travels, ancient temples, bustling street markets, and tranquil landscapes. But among them I found a sketch of me, sitting on the porch with my journal in hand, the ocean stretching out behind me. "I wanted to capture this," she said, smiling. "You look at peace." The word struck me deeply. I hadn't thought about it before, but she was right. Despite everything, I had found a measure of peace here. It wasn't the kind that came from resolution or closure, but from the simple act of being present, of appreciating the moments I still had. In Lena's company, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Gratitude for the sunsets that painted the sky, for the sound of the waves that sang me to sleep, and for the laughter that reminded me I wasn't alone. Despite everything I had lost, I was grateful for this chance to say goodbye on my own terms. One night, as the stars blanketed the sky, I sat on the porch with Lena by my side. The ocean whispered softly in the distance, and a cool breeze carried the scent of the sea. I looked over at her, her face illuminated by the moonlight, and felt a profound sense of peace. "Thank you," I said simply, my voice thick with emotion. "For what?" she asked, tilting her head. "For being here," I replied, "for reminding me that there's still something to hold on to even now." She smiled, and we sat in silence, watching the waves roll in and out, the rhythm as eternal and unyielding as life itself. Each morning, as the first rays of sunlight spilled across the ocean, I sat at the small wooden desk in my cottage, pen in hand, and wrote. The words came slowly at first, halting and uncertain, but they gained momentum as the days passed. These letters weren't just for myself, they were for the future, for the people who would carry on after I was gone. They were fragments of my heart, carefully preserved in ink. The letters to my unborn child were the most difficult to write. How do you speak to someone you'll never meet, someone whose existence is still shrouded in doubt and betrayal? Yet as I wrote, I found a rhythm, a connection. I shared stories from my life, moments I hoped would give them a sense of who I was. I wrote about my dreams, my mistakes, and the lessons I had learned through both joy and heartache. "Dear little one letter began. I hope that wherever life takes you, you carry kindness with you, not just for others, but for yourself. You'll make mistakes, I did, and so did your mother, but that's how we grow. I won't be there to hold your hand, but know that I love you, even from afar." Each letter was a thread connecting me to a future I would never see. Some days the words came easily, spilling onto the page in a torrent of emotion. Other days they felt like pulling teeth, the weight of my impending absence pressing too heavily on my heart. But I kept writing because it was the only gift I could leave behind. I also wrote to Rachel. Those letters were different, more reflective, more raw. They weren't full of accusations or bitterness, but of honesty. I told her about my pain, my regrets, and the moments I had loved her most. I didn't know if she would ever read them, but writing them helped me untangle the knot of emotions she had left behind. And then there were the letters to Lena. Those were the easiest to write. She had become a bright, unwavering presence in my final days, her laughter and kindness a beacon of light in the darkness. In one letter I wrote, "You've shown me that even in the darkest moments there's still beauty. You reminded me of the small joys I had forgot. Thank you for walking beside me when I needed it most." One afternoon, as the sun warmed the porch, I handed Lena a bundle of sealed letters tied together with twine. She took them without hesitation, her expression solemn. "When I'm gone," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, "I want you to deliver these. To Rachel, to the child in herself." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I'll make sure they get where they need to go," she promised, her voice unwavering. From that moment on, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight I had been carrying began to lighten, knowing that these pieces of me would endure even when I couldn't. I spent hours watching the ocean, its endless waves a reminder that life continues unbroken even when we are gone. One day, while walking along the beach, I met a local artist who was sketching the shoreline. He was an older man with a kind face and a weathered sketchbook tucked under his arm. We struck up a conversation, and before long he asked if he could paint my portrait. "I want to capture this moment," he said, "so you'll always have this place." I agreed, and over the next few days he worked on the painting while we sat on the beach together. As he sketched and painted, we talked about life, art, and the ways we leave pieces of ourselves behind. When he finished, he handed me the canvas with a smile. The painting showed me sitting on the beach, the ocean stretching out behind me, a journal in my lap. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." The painting became a treasure to me, a tangible reminder of the peace I had found in this quiet coastal town. But as the days passed, the pain became sharper, more insistent. Each movement felt like a struggle, and every breath carried the weight of my illness. I knew my time was slipping away faster than I had hoped. Yet I refused to let bitterness take hold. I had spent too much of my life carrying anger, and I didn't want to leave this world that way. One afternoon, I visited the small church in town. Its doors were open, and the scent of candles and old wood greeted me as I stepped inside. The space was quiet, illuminated by soft sunlight filtering through stained glass windows. I lit a candle and stood before it, my thoughts turning to the child I had lost years ago. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I hope you're somewhere beautiful." The flame flickered, and for a moment I felt a sense of connection, as if my words had reached across the veil to a place I couldn't follow. When I returned to the cottage, Lena was waiting for me with an idea. "Let's take a boat out to sea," she said, her eyes bright. "You need to feel the wind on your face again." I hesitated, my body weak and uncooperative, but her enthusiasm was infectious. The next morning we boarded a small fishing boat, the captain a friendly local who greeted us warmly. As the boat pushed off from the shore, I felt the cool spray of seawater against my skin and the steady rise and fall of the waves beneath us. For the first time in years, I felt free. The vastness of the ocean stretched out around me, endless and unyielding. I closed my eyes and let the wind whip through my hair, a smile tugging at my lips despite the ache in my chest. That night back on the porch, Lena and I sat beneath a blanket of stars. The sky was impossibly clear, each constellation shining brightly against the darkness. I leaned back in my chair, letting the stillness of the moment wash over me. "I'm ready," I said aloud, the words surprising me with their certainty. Lena turned to me, her expression soft. "Ready for what?" "For whatever comes next," I replied. "I've made my peace." She reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Then let's make these moments count," she said, and we did. We sat there in silence, the stars above us and the sound of the waves below. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. The days had grown shorter, each one marked by an increasing frailty that I could no longer ignore. My body felt like it was betraying me, growing weaker with every breath, every step. But I wasn't afraid, not anymore. The ocean had given me peace, and Lena's unwavering presence reminded me that even in my final moments, I wasn't truly alone. That morning, I decided to take one last walk along the beach. The effort of getting out of bed was monumental, but I pushed through the pain, summoning the last reserves of my strength. Lena met me at the door, her face soft with understanding. She didn't ask if I was sure. She simply offered her arm for support, and together we made our way to the shore. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the waves lapping gently at the edge of the beach. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, and the horizon stretched out endlessly before us. Lena stayed by my side, silent and steady, matching her pace to mine as we walked. She didn't speak, but her presence was enough. It grounded me, gave me the strength to keep moving. We stopped at a rocky outcrop where the waves crashed against the stones, sending up sprays of white foam. I leaned heavily against her, my breath shallow, my legs trembling. "This is it," I said quietly. "This is where I say goodbye." Lena didn't argue or try to convince me otherwise. She simply nodded, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Together we stood there, letting the ocean's rhythm wash over us as if it were trying to imprint itself in my memory one last time. Back at the cottage, I gathered my journal and the bundle of letters I had written over the past weeks. I held them tightly, feeling the weight of my thoughts, my emotions, my life encapsulated in those pages. I turned to Lena, her eyes already glistening with unshed tears. "I need you to deliver these," I said, pressing the journal and letters into her hands. "Make sure they get to the right people." Her voice trembled as she replied, "I will, I promise." I hesitated for a moment, then added, "You've been my family, Lena. I don't know how I would have done this without you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled me into a hug, her arms wrapped tightly around me. "And you've been mine," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this." Her tears soaked into my shirt, but I didn't mind. The embrace was warm, real, and filled with the kind of love that didn't need to be spoken aloud. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, I lay in my bed, staring out at the ocean through the open window. The waves rolled in and out, their rhythm steady and unchanging. It was a sound that had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. I felt a deep sense of calm settle over me, a stillness that was both comforting and final. My thoughts drifted to the child I would never hold, the future I would never see. I thought of Rachel, of the love I had once believed would last forever. And yet I didn't feel sadness or regret, I felt free. The room grew darker as night fell and the stars began to appear one by one in the sky. My eyelids grew heavy, and as I drifted to sleep, I let the sound of the ocean carry me toward peace. When morning came, Lena found me still in bed. The soft smile on my face told her everything she needed to know. She sat beside me for hours, holding my hand, her tears silent but steady. She didn't call anyone right away. She just stayed there, giving herself and me the space to let go. Later that day, the townspeople gathered to say their goodbyes. Word of my passing had spread quickly, and the kindness I had experienced in those fleeting weeks now came back to me tenfold. People I had barely known brought flowers, shared quiet prayers, and offered Lena their support. It was a final gift from a community that had embraced a stranger as one of their own. True to my wishes, Lena scattered my ashes at sea. She took the small boat out alone, her face resolute despite the grief that lingered in her eyes. She stood at the edge of the boat, the urn cradled in her hands, and slowly let the ashes fall into the water. The waves carried them away, folding them into the vast, endless ocean. "Bye," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the water. "Thank you for everything." When she returned to shore, she found the artist waiting for her with the portrait he had painted of me. Together, they decided to hang it in the town's cafe, a quiet tribute to the man who had come to find peace. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. The portrait would stay there, a reminder of a life that had briefly touched theirs. Lena didn't linger in the town for long. She had a promise to keep. With the letters and journal tucked safely in her bag, she began her journey, carrying pieces of me to those who needed them most. The letters started their journey too, touching lives in ways I could never have imagined. Rachel received hers first. She read it alone, her tears soaking the pages as she realized the depth of my love and the finality of my goodbye. The words changed her. She left Lucas, choosing to rebuild her life with honesty and humility. The letters to my child, delivered years later, became a source of strength and inspiration. They shared stories of a father who had loved deeply, who had made mistakes but had never stopped trying. They carried a legacy of hope, kindness, and resilience. As for Lena, she carried my memory with her wherever she went. She used my story as inspiration, helping others find light in their darkest moments. She kept the portrait of me in her heart, a quiet reminder of the friendship that had shaped both of our lives. And so my journey ended, but my story continued. Through the letters, through the memories, through the lives I had touched, I remained. The ocean had carried me away, but the ripples of my life would endure, spreading love and hope in my absence. I watched from a place beyond the physical, a silent observer tethered by the bonds of love and unfinished stories. Time moved differently here, moments stretched and contracted like the ebb and flow of the ocean waves I had come to cherish. My journey had ended, but the ripples of my life were just beginning to touch those I had left behind. Rachel received my letters last. Lena had honored my request, delivering them with a quiet grace. Rachel sat alone in our old living room, the familiar surroundings unchanged yet profoundly different without me there. As she opened the bundle, her hands trembled ever so slightly. The first letter began simply, "Dear Rachel, by the time you read this, I will be gone. There are things I need to say, truths that were left unspoken between us." Her eyes scanned the pages, tears welling as she absorbed each word. My reflections on our shared past, my acknowledgement of her pain and my own shortcomings, and my final forgiveness all unfolded before her. Her tears stained the paper, small blotches smudging the ink, but she read on, absorbing the depth of my love and the finality of my goodbye. The letters changed her in ways I had only dared to hope for. She confronted the emptiness that had driven us apart, recognizing the facade of her relationship with Lucas. The illusion of happiness she had clung to shattered, revealing the hollow core beneath. With a newfound clarity, Rachel left Lucas, choosing to rebuild her life with honesty and humility. She sought counseling, mended broken relationships with friends and family, and began a journey of self-discovery that had been long overdue. Meanwhile, Lena carried my memory like a lantern, using my story to light the way for others lost in darkness. She traveled from town to town, sharing pieces of my journey with those who needed to hear it most. In shelters, hospitals, and quiet cafes, she spoke of love, loss, and the power of forgiveness. My words became a bridge connecting strangers through shared experiences and the universal desire for redemption. Years passed, and my child, our son, grew into a bright-eyed boy named Evan. Lena had kept her promise, and when the time was right, she delivered the letters I had written for him. They met in a sunlit park, the air filled with the laughter of children and the rustling of leaves. Evan looked up at Lena with curious eyes as she handed him the worn bundle. "Your father loved you deeply," she told him, her voice gentle. He wanted you to know him through these letters. Evan cradled the letters as if they were the most precious treasures, and in a way they were. Through my words, he learned about my hopes and dreams, my mistakes and triumphs. I told him about the beauty of the ocean, the solace I found in nature, and the importance of kindness. Each letter was a conversation, a moment of connection that transcended the boundaries of time and existence. The Howards, ever the compassionate souls, planted a tree in their garden in my honor. It was a young oak, sturdy and full of promise. As the years went by, its branches stretched toward the sky, a living testament to the man who had found solace under their roof. They tended to it lovingly, often sitting beneath its shade to reminisce about the fleeting friendship we had shared. Lena and Evan collaborated to compile my writings into a memoir. It was a labor of love, piecing together journal entries, letters, and reflections into a cohesive narrative. When it was published, it didn't make headlines or top bestseller lists, but it found its way into the hands of those who needed it most. Readers wrote letters expressing how the story had offered them hope, helped them navigate their own losses, and inspired them to seek forgiveness. Evan grew into a kind and compassionate young man, embodying the values I had held dear. He volunteered at community centers, offered a listening ear to those in need, and pursued a career in counseling. "For you, Dad," he often said quietly, his eyes reflecting a determination that filled me with pride. He carried my legacy forward, not just in name but in spirit. One quiet afternoon, Rachel visited the coastal town where I had spent my final days. The years had softened her features, and there was a serenity in her expression that hadn't been there before. She walked along the beach, the same stretch of sand where Lena and I had shared our last moments. Stopping at a place where the waves gently kissed the shore, she knelt down and laid a bouquet of white lilies. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her words carried away by the ocean breeze. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, but there was a hint of a smile as she stood and gazed out at the endless horizon. It was a moment of closure, a silent reconciliation with the past. The town had not forgotten me. The portrait the artist had painted hung in the corner of the cafe, a quiet tribute that locals and visitors alike admired. Stories of the man who had come seeking peace were shared over cups of coffee and slices of pie. Small acts of kindness were performed in my memory, a free meal for a stranger, help offered to someone in need, all inspired by the brief but meaningful time I had spent there. In the end, I realized that I had left behind more than letters. I had left a legacy woven from threads of love, forgiveness, and peace. My life, though marked by pain and mistakes, had become a catalyst for change in others. I had learned that even in our final moments, we have the power to choose how we depart from this world. From my place beyond, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Evan was thriving, Rachel was healing, Lena was inspiring others, and the Howards continued to spread warmth and kindness. The ripples of my existence touched lives in ways I could never have imagined. As the sun set over the ocean, casting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, I let go. The waves below shimmered, reflecting the endless possibilities that life offers even amid hardship. I had found my peace and in turn had helped others find theirs. And so my story concluded not with regret or sorrow, but with a quiet affirmation of the enduring power of love. A legacy that proved that our actions, no matter how small, can leave an indelible mark on the hearts of others. In that understanding, I finally felt complete.